comes to public housing? Because this continues to be something where we know that your department will have to go to the legislature, whether it be for more funding for upgrades to current facilities and housing units, as well as advocating for more. What are some of the highlights, or what are some of the things that you're really pushing for specifically for your department when it comes to the public housing piece?
Yeah, no, thank you. So we're motivated by the fact whenever we open the wait list, 10,000 folks line up so they can put an application in hopes that they can get one of the 400 units that became available. So that's the need. So we're doing two fronts. For the existing inventory that we have, and we're serving about 45,000 tenants right now. For the inventory that becomes available, we go to the legislature and ask for some money so we can fix those units. We're going to use the emergency proclamation to expedite the delivery. So it'll take us 3 months instead of a year and a half. So that we'll continue to do. We're also going to go to the legislature to fund the Calais Momi, the 10,000 additional units that we're going to build. First phase that we're hoping to bring in front of legislation next session will be 650 units and mayor right homes, as well as 250 units in Kauai and 250 units in Hilo. And we have in another site that we're looking at in Maui. So that will be our ask from the legislature for the next session.
I want to ask you about that meeting. The Building Beyond Barriers Working Group had that meeting that was, widely publicized and got very heated. It got very tense, and is in part my understanding of what led to Nani Medeiros deciding that she was not going to stay in her role. Given the tension that we saw there and how difficult that was, how do you expect things to move forward? How do we get past that kind of divisiveness? This is an issue that people have a lot of passion about. Clearly, I see your passion, but how do you bring those opponents onto your side?
I think we're going to kill them with kindness. The bottom line, we understand that the feelings were raw. Maui just happened and there were a lot of issues. I don't think we're going to have a repeat of that. It's unfortunate. It should never have happened. Most testimonies, if not all the testimonies, were about items not on the agenda itself. A lot of comments were about sunshine law. That's not an issue anymore. A lot of comments were about you're going to bypass the environment. That's no longer there. A lot of comments were incorrectly about thinking that it's about Lahaina and all of the things that we see in TikTok and others that unfounded. That has been clarified. A lot of things about LUC, that the big lands and exempting big developers, that's no longer there. We're going to be civil. We're going to remember that we are in Hawaii. We're going to exert the aloha spirit. We're going to remind everyone to keep that. We're going to give everyone the right to speak and really provide comments with love comments. And at the end of that, 22 people in the better group, they're going to make that decision for us to move forward.
I want to also, you spoke about Maui and Lahaina, and even in your beginning opening statement and comment about the proclamation and addressing some of those issues, specifically because that second proclamation came after the fire. When we look at Maui and what's happening there, how do you think that this proclamation and how do you think this group will work specifically for those residents in Maui? I mean, how do you separate the two? Because there are obviously two very big issues independent of each other, but all having to do with housing as a whole.
Yeah, so we are clear and will continue to be clear that nothing that has to do with Lahaina is under this emergency proclamation. That's going to come when people of Lahaina have decided how they want to move forward, and they have done, it's probably a year and a half away from it. There are other parts of Maui that we need to use the proclamation to build units so people can live, and I think that's going to move into that direction. But Lahaina, the BBB group has not been created for that. I think Lahaina is going to have its own everything, and we're not even there to discuss it.
Okay, let's go back to that 10,000 waiting, 10,000 people showing up for 400 units is what I believe you said. Yes. Tell us about the need in our community when it comes to, the deeply affordable housing, if you will, and where we're falling short.
The need is tremendous. I mean, it's heartbreaking when we see that. Heartbreaking. The average, I have 45,000 tenants in our agency alone. The average AMI, they make $12,000 per family a year.
Per family.
Per family. This is average per family. An average, meaning there's a lot of people that we have, they have zero income. And people say, lazy people, they can go to work. I'm talking about the elderly. I'm talking about the disabled. I'm talking about a mentally challenged. I'm talking about a lot of folks. These are the people that want housing that are forgotten. So our agency provides that. So we are, for 6,250 units, we are blind to income. If your turn comes, you make zero or you make 50% EMI, and those are the levels, we're gonna serve you. If you make zero, we're gonna subsidize that number. And the federal government, we're about 90-something% federally subsidized in our agency. So the need is tremendous. It continues to be tremendous. And with the interest rate that's going up, we need all the housing we can get.
In looking at, you mentioned you're going to the legislature asking for 10,000 more units to come online for funding for that. What has the conversation been like with the legislature? I mean, we know at times it's very difficult for departments to go in and get money and, you know, state your case. But what has the response been by lawmakers? Do you feel like you'll have a successful run in the upcoming legislative session with some of these needs that you have?
I believe so. I think my first year I took everything personally. They don't want to give us the money. Second year, same thing maybe. But as I work with these folks, they really have their heart. If they have they have competing priorities, and sometimes they have to make a decision. Do we give money for housing, or do we give it for child support? Do we give money for health care and all of that? Our job is to educate and bring forth what we can build. And I think the taxpayers has put those folks in there, as they have put the governor, to make those decisions, what goes first, what goes next. Whatever they give us, we're gonna execute. But we are ready and eager to make sure that this thing gets done. So we'll wait and see. We'll put a very good program there, and they're gonna have to look at all the competing priorities. I'm sure Maui will take a big chunk of that. And at the end of the day, we take whatever they give us and move forward and build. If we can build 10,000, let us build 1,200. And